This is the Biblical Mind Podcast, produced by the Center for Hebraic Thought. Honest 5-star reviews help others find this podcast. Visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org for articles and videos that explore the deep structures of Scripture.
I was born and brought up in the Kuki Primal religion, that is traditional religion. Somewhat, although we are part of India, but we are not in no way closer to Hindu culture,
right?
Hindu religion. Therefore, our religion was closer to Old Testament, the Jews' tradition. Some of them, not everything, but some of them. So my father was a priest. His duty was to live very life of integrity, and then has to learn some kind of chantings, and then heal people, and then diagnose the sickness of the people, and then gather herbs and things that he uses to heal people. Kind of a traditional healer. So I was following him and planning to be a follower of my father. But at the age of around maybe 11, 12, I am not sure. I don't know my age, their birth, and things like this, so it's difficult for me to say. So Christianity came to next to my village, and then it came along with modern education. So my parents thought, well, for your generation, you cannot help, but you have to go along with other people, and so they allow me to explore a new faith, and then so I embraced. I became Christian, and so then that Christianity that I embraced was very much part of European or Westernized influence theology, and so I was brought up in that kind of faith tradition, and then I did all my education, including my PhD, but it was much later that I realized that this is not the best way for us as people in Northeast India, among the tribal people. We call tribal people, indigenous people, that we don't have to go know God via somebody else's culture, but from where we are, that's a challenge. Then I left my job, actually. Left my job in university. I was had a privilege of serving in university for about 20 years as a teaching theology and ethics and all that. And so I left that job and then came back to Northeast and then initiated a center for this integral study, specialized in indigenous studies. So the point is that for me also, this is a new thing that I have not learned during my so-called theological education, but I learned more after coming back here when I interact with local people, and of course this idea also influenced and encouraged by my Western friends, and so to be fair enough, it is a kind of a Christian journey, a next step after my conversion to Christianity. So in other words, rerouting myself into faith my faith and my culture, and thereby discovering, if you like, the word discovering, more aspects of the gospel, Christian message, in my context. But this discovery, for me, I'm convinced that is not only for my own context, but it's also, I'm convinced more and more that some of these things are very helpful for people outside my context, or the larger global context. So I'm still learning, of course, but I'm so happy that I'm doing what I'm doing, and then I'm also encouraged my own father, who is no more, when he was alive, and he used to tell me that when I was converted, I accepted Christianity, and I, asked him to stop following that religion and then embrace Christianity. And then he used to tell me, you don't know what you're doing, but then after me, you will spend money, your time in your life to search what I'm doing, but you will not find there, he says. Wow. So now I realize, especially when I was doing my research in Britain, the British Library and archives in Oxford and Wales, and that really came to me afresh, that I'm now looking for insights that my father used to follow, but nowhere I can find those things. So, but still, then it's something's better than nothing. So I'm happy that God has given me a chance to do this a little bit, and then I'm also grateful to my friends who have encouraged me to in this journey. So thank you.
No, I think that's really helpful. And as far as it is amazing to me that you understanding better how Christianity can be a different kind of religion in this little enclave of India, which honestly, I didn't know this part of India existed until I was reading the very beginning. I didn't know there's a little chunk that goes off into to the mainland there. So this was all new to me, including that there's this kind of primal religion groups there. But that you can learn more through your own theological journey, and then people like me sitting in New York City are reading it thinking, oh, I can think of 15 ways in which this helps me to understand what's happening in my context as well. That's amazing to me. So I have a lot of questions. I maybe want to ask you first, because you studied at Aberdeen, so you've spent some time in the West. When you say European or Western Christianity, like what are the obvious things to you that are different about European Western Christianity that aren't necessarily they're not necessary to Christianity itself? It's just that you associate with that flavor of Christianity.
Well, when I say Western culture or Western form of Christianity, first I must say that I am in no way condemning or judging, because that's how our friends in the West in the world, they find it meaningful. So it's meaningful for them. But for me, what was the difference was I came from the culture where you as individual sometimes cannot make a decision on your own because you are in a community. I'm not the oldest son in the family, therefore I don't make major decisions. My eldest brother does. That was a kind of culture I came from, and then when I went to Britain, that was something that I find very different. The difference that I found with my own cultural worldview was the fact that in Britain, or in Western society, a person survives on his or her own in many ways. Whereas in my culture, is a community base. And for example, if you are a younger son or a child, most of the time you don't make decisions. The eldest son does, and so there was little difference I found, and in fact that somehow impacted on me when I returned to my own community. That sometimes you want to do things the way you want it, but sometimes your family, your society, community doesn't feel that way, and then you become somebody who is not really getting along with the community. And so there was a cultural aspect, and then it also connected to the idea of faith itself, like in a primary religion, it was a community-based. Community. When I say community, it is include not only human beings but also the unseen spirits, nature, animals, and all that. Yeah. So you cannot live the way you wanted. You have to live it considering other beings around you. So therefore, you're really living consciously of other beings around you, so that you don't hurt their feelings. Whereas in Western culture, it was like individual is the most important. And then, for example, salvation is one person. If you believe in Jesus, then you go to heaven. So that's everything about a person, individual. And so not necessarily theologically wrong or right, but then it is a difference between the two cultures. So that was something that I find the Western form of worldview and thinking about Christianity and theology, and especially when it comes to we have a practice called born again, born again thing, and then is you are the one who is responsible for your life. So therefore, it indirectly encourages individualism through Christianity. So therefore, if you're a good Christian, then you slowly leave your culture and follow some other traditions. So that's why that's where I think the challenge for us to rethink spirituality and Christianity and individual versus community and things like that. Yeah.
It also makes me think that, coming from your perspective, growing up in that culture, lots of things in the Hebrew Bible and even the New Testament would make more sense to you. I mean, a lot of the things that I find myself having to explain to students are these precise issues. They don't understand the idea that you're always represented by somebody who, goes before you, or that, that whole house was baptized, like the idea that everything happens as a group. So I wonder if you see strategic advantages in understanding Scripture that quite honestly, I'd say the Western Church needs to learn from the global church how to understand parts of Scripture.
I have not learned this one from any one of my Western friends, but it just came to my mind when I think further into this Christian gospel or message in the primal context, the idea of sin and salvation. So in my culture, when a person commits sin, for example, you shed the blood of someone, either mistake or consciously, it is the earth that suffer because of your sin. So because of your sin, that the earth cannot bear fruit or cannot produce vegetable. And so the earth is the one that suffered because of sin, and you as a guilty, your responsibility is not to apologize to the person whom you hurt as such, but then to do something about the nature. So in this context, me as a guilty person has to do rituals to restore the fertility of the earth. So the fertility of the earth. Now, I read this similar thing in Genesis. When Cain kills his brother, and so it was the earth suffer. But how did we miss that in the New Testament, Old Testament the commentary? Because it was not the worldview of our friends in the Western world. Therefore, they missed. It was not so important for them, I guess, I presume. But if it was me writing that Genesis commentary, then I would pick up that one and I would easily connect to my own practice of what we call tolte. Tolte meaning the clearing of the ground or restoring of the fertility of the ground, the earth, the soil. So then I see, well, primal religion sometimes is closer to biblical message than the Western, the commentaries that we have, So that's one, for example.
I can think of many. I mean, even just immediately after that with Noah, I'm always having to explain to students. It kind of freaks Western students out that God makes a covenant with the animals alongside Noah and humanity, right? And they can't understand why. They can't understand why an animal would be held accountable for murder as well as a human. And so those deeper connection, I said, well, there's a very deep connection. Violence, as one of my friends, Matt Lynch, he's an Old Testament scholar, likes to say, probably the best way to translate what happens before Noah's flood is the wickedness of man ruins the earth. And all of that language. I just wrote a book on this that hasn't gone to press yet, but it struck me in looking into a lot of things how much the dirt suffers from the wickedness of humans, like that direct connection in Genesis.
That is very important, particularly this present day of the ecological crisis. That is very important for me, It is human sin that we are not got stuck now because all this climate change and all that, because of human sin. It is a sin that it is, the nature is unable to bear it, and so therefore I think rereading of some of these important texts would be very helpful. I mean, for this. In the context of the ecological crisis also.
Yeah. You mentioned in passing, that this idea is not in the commentaries that you read. And it makes me think a lot of American and British, European in general, but a lot of American and British theology and biblical scholarship gets, for lack of a better word, exported to the rest of Christianity around the world. And I wonder, as a professor who taught for 20 years theology, did you ever find yourself constantly having to explain in your culture why this commentary or this theology was so concerned about something that you weren't concerned about, or you thought they were over worried about things that weren't necessarily a direct concern in your culture?
Well, there might be two things. One thing is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the things that I'm doing just now is a recent development. So much of these things were not there when I was in the seminary. That's one. And secondly, even there was anything, then the issues of tribal context were not given equal chance. I'm sorry to say this, but it's a fact that in Indian theological education, when I say mainline India, because we are in periphery, where we are in very extreme corner of India, and not only friends like yourself, you said that you never, I mean, you didn't know about the Northeast, but many people in Central India were not aware of our existence. Therefore, our issues were not. I'm sorry to say this again, but were not taken as important issues. This might change now, but then about 10 years ago, it was not the case. Therefore, these issues we were not able to raise in our classrooms, in our teachings, also because there were other issues that the majority communities are facing. Those issues have dominated theological discussions. For example, when we talk about contextual theology, when we talk about Indian Christian theology, there was nothing about tribal theology in those days. Therefore, it was not there. But this has changed now. I think seminaries have started talking about this now. So it's much better. But in those days, there were not much. And another issue that I used to share in my class was not from the Bible, but the creeds, Apostles' Creeds, Nicene Creeds, all that, and then we said Jesus was born, and then we jump over the life and jump directly to the crucifixion, and we omit the whole life experience, the work of Jesus, which are very important for tribal people, for indigenous people. And so I used to share those things with my friends. But then there's also a view, concept that if you're a faithful follower of Jesus, you have to be strict to the tradition. So questioning, the creeds, questioning the traditions can be also considered as a part of weakness by some people. So there's also a struggle in that way. But I struggle with these issues. So then I ask the question: Are we here to preserve? Are we the custodians of other people's faith? Or do we have a theology? Have we seen Jesus? Have we experienced God? Then tell me that that is the theology from a tribal people. So what we call theology or doctrine, or I don't know which tradition you follow, but we say here that evangelical. Okay. So if you're a good and faithful evangelical, and you have to stick to the teachings of those people, And so the question arises: Are we simply a custodians of other people's faith and tradition, or are we also, supposed to see Christ and experience Christ and express that faith fresh from us, from our own context? So, I use challenge my students. Yeah.
No, I think that's very helpful, and even the distinction you made before that these tribal religions where you're from in the Northeast aren't even really the center. They haven't been part of the discussion in big evangelical Indian theological seminaries or institutions.
Yeah, it's true.
And so, and I think we have similar issues in the United States. How closely do you follow the historical doctrines? When is it appropriate to critique them or break from them strategically? But and some people might hear this, and I can imagine them saying, "Oh, well, for the sake of diversity, this is a buzzword in America these days, but." Just for the sake of diversity, they had to add in this tribal stuff, so they could meet everybody's needs and accommodate. And I'm hearing you, and after reading this book, Voices from the Margins, I'm actually thinking of something else. Is that I actually learned more about my community's relationship to God, and I would learn more about Western Christianity by studying what you guys have said about how Christianity interfaces with tribal religions in this little place in India I had never even heard about. So it was actually less an issue of bringing in diverse voices, although I think there's a value for that in the scripture itself. But more, I learned more theologically by listening to this other perspective that I didn't know existed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And then, for example, my contribution in the book, I had to take a step, saying that, well, you have to risk Christ for Christ's sake. There's a scholar called M.M. Thomas in India who said the same thing. So because for us indigenous people, one of the stumbling block is not people from outside, but our own thinking that, don't do this, or else you'll make a mistake, a theological mistake. That fear becomes a stumbling block to produce a decent reflection of theology because of that fear. So I try to break that fear and then say something at the risk of being considered as someone heretic, by proposing that we need to discern the footprints of God in our tradition, in our history. So I suggest that that against the thinking that we became to know God only after missionaries have arrived. So then I asked the question, who brought us? Who brought our forefathers, foremothers, foreparents up to the time when the first missionary arrived? One thing. And second, are there many sources of good things? Or if the source of good things is the only one, then good things in our culture must be from God, I said. So then it becomes easier for us to think positively and then reconnect ourselves, to reroute ourselves into our culture. I don't know how much you follow Indian situation just now. So for us as indigenous people, it's so important, particularly in Northeast, because in Northeast we have a different history, different culture, different tradition, different geographical area from the mainland India. Therefore, identity and culture is very important. This is where Christianity, in my view, would help us. So Christianity is not only to go for going to heaven, or it's not only for the salvation of your soul, but it's also help you to live a life of human beings with equal dignity and rights, and and also contribute to society. So that's how I feel that unless we reroute ourselves into culture and faith, then we will not be able to contribute to the society, the well-being of the society. So this is so important for me.
I appreciate that. And so you published this book. It's called Voices from the Margins, Wisdom of Primal Peoples in the Era of World Christianity, with you and Dr. David Smith.
Yes.
This is with Langham Press.
Yes.
And I wonder, what's your association with the Langham Partnership, which is the John Stott Legacy Foundation, I guess. Do you have an association with them?
Well, Chris Wright used to be part of us at UBS, Union Biblical Seminary in Pune, where I worked about 20 years. And so we knew each other and we worked together. And then Langham also helped our faculty development projects for their PhD studies and all that. And so John Stott is also very close to us in terms of the theology and work. And I myself had a privilege to hear his last message in Keswick Convention. And then the other thing was my first book, Can God Save My Village? It was also published by Langham. So this, those are my connections. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Langham is one of the few, maybe only Christian publisher who's kind of committed to publishing global Christian voices and distributing them, if I'm correct.
Yeah, with a cheaper price so that we can afford to buy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It's an impressive catalog of mostly scholars that people in the West have not heard of, unless they've had their eyes open to it. But I always keep my eyes on the Langham Partnership website. So, well, Dr. Jangkholam Haokip, I hope I said that halfway correctly. Close enough. Thank you so much for your wisdom, and thank you for this book, Voices from the Margins. It was like powerfully insightful, and there were even a few chapters in there were worth the price and the time of the whole book. It was just amazing. So, and it's a collection of essays from various scholars on primal religions today. So, thank you for your wisdom and guidance on this topic.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Biblical Mind podcast, exploring the deep structures of Christian scripture. For more, visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org. Subscribe to this podcast at all the usual places so you never miss an episode.